Hello guys, welcome to this new video tutorial on object-oriented Python, and what we are going to see in this video, as promised in the previous video, is the difference between regular methods, class methods and static methods. So firstly we'll see what a regular method is. So just here in the last video we have this full name method. So by default it is having the argument of self, so it is going to this constructor method and then initializing the method. So such a method is called as regular method. But suppose we have some dedicated method that is dedicated to the class itself, so such a method is called as the class method. For example, when in this case, when we were changing the employee class variable as employee dot raise, and we were updating the class variable here, so instead of updating this directly, we can also give this to a class method. So to give a class method, what we have to do is that, so this class @class method specifies a decorator that is to be written whenever you are declaring a class method. Now just like the other method, we'll write the def keyword, and we can write the class method as like set raise amount as a new method. And what are the parameters that will be passed to this method? That is, the class itself will be passed as a parameter, and the new amount that you want to set will be passed as a parameter. And later inside it you can write class with referring to the employee class, and then the raise amount, that is the variable that we have here, will be equal to the amount that we pass in. So this raise amount that we have written here is by default written here, and it is by default 3.05. That was the initial value that we gave inside the class. Now what we'll do is that since we have declared this method, so now what we'll do, instead of updating this employee raise amount by this way, what we'll do, we will pass in, we will call this just created method here. So we change it to employee set raise amount method, and the variable that we will be passing to it is the new amount that you want to set. For example, I'll put it as 1.50, and we'll call the method. So whenever the program comes here, it is going to call this new class method that we have just written, and by default it will take the reference of the class. Like in regular methods, it is taking the reference of the self constructor that is here. Here it is going to take the reference of the class, and the other parameter is the amount that is going to be passed from here, and it will change the value of the class. So now when we call this with the reference of this set raise amount that we have just written, and pass in the new amount here, and we run it, so you can see now that the raise amount has been updated. But instead of updating it with the help of the class variable, now we are calling the class method to update the raise amount. So again, just to show you, I will again change this to something else like 3.80, and I'll run it again. So you can see that each and every raise amount here is shown, whether being the class raise amount or the instance raise amount has been changed here. So what it shows is that whenever you are calling a class method, it changes the attributes of the class itself, because we are working with the class itself, because a class is being passed as a parameter here, and other parameter or arguments are being passed instead of instance variable or instance method, where only a uh, certain object reference is being taken inside a class. The task that we can do with this class method is that class methods can be also used as an alternative constructor method. So let's see them in action. So what I meant by that is that, suppose we have three variables here which are in the form of a string that has certain employee details like my name, my surname, and my pay, and these are the other employee name that are, I have given my sibling's name. And then what we are doing is that we are passing this object to a splitter method, and which will split it on the basis of where it finds the dash in the string. And what it will do is that it will create a new object, new employee1, with reference to this class employee, and it will pass the first name, last name, and pay to this class. And by default it will call the init method, and it will update it. And later on, lastly, we have this new employee one dot email and new employee dot pay. So ideally it should print it. So let's see if it is printing. So we can see that it is printing the new employee's email here and the new employee's pay here, using this thing that we have done, this arrangement that we have done. But the problem is that here we are actually passing this the string to the employee class itself. So instead of passing this to the employee class itself, what if we define a class method itself that can work as a constructor inside the class to do such string splitting. What I meant by that is that instead of here, what we can do is that we can define another class method. So for that, I'll use the decorator again, that is class method, and we give the name as define from string. And since it is a class method, we pass in the class and we pass in an employee string that the user may enter. And what we'll do is that inside this employee string, we need to write this line which will split it by default. So we cut it from here and here we paste it. And what we do is that after this, we need to return this into the class itself. So what we'll do is that we'll write the return keyword here and we will call the class, that is the employee class, and what we return is the first name, the last name, and the pay. Now we don't need to give this as a generic string because we are just passing in an employee string. So this is not for a single object reference, so we can write it in this way. Now suppose I want to print this again. So what we can do is that instead of calling the class itself and defining and calling the init method, we can directly call the class method that we have here. So we will refer to the employee class, and inside this we have the class method that we just created, that is toString. And the only thing that we are going to pass as a parameter is the string that the user is going to enter. So we can either pass the first string, second string, third string, no matter what. And what this will do is that the new object will be created, which is going to call this from string method from the employee class itself, which is a class method, and it is going to split and pass you the values of the employee. So if we run this line, we can see we get the same output. But suppose now instead of this first employee, we need the employee third's details. So just we can change the name of the argument that we are passing here and it shows the new name. So this is what is meant by that a class method can also be used as a constructor method. A real world example to such class method codes is written inside your datetime module. So if you wish to see it, you can see it inside the datetime module. So we'll go further for the static methods. That is the last type of method that I'll cover in this video. So what static methods mean is that by default an regular method will take self as the first argument to it, and it will call the self constructor. By default, a class method is going to take the class as the first argument and it is going to call the class. And just like that, a regular method does not take any argument of the self keyword or the class itself. So I'll show you an example of. So to show a static method, what I will do is that since static method does not take any argument like the self or the class, but it has to be defined with a decorator. So we will write at the rate static method, and we will, what we'll do is that we will try to create a method that is going to take a date from the user and it will show whether it is a weekday or not. So the name of my method I'm giving is workday, and the only thing that we are passing in is the day. See, you can see here there is no self, there is no class, and what we'll do is that it will check whether that days dot weekend is equal to 5, that is Saturday, or this day weekend is equal to 6, and then enter, return false, else return true. So now what I will do is that I will remove these things here that we have, and what we'll do is that we have a static method here. Now we need to call this method. So what we'll do is that firstly I'll write, we need to import the date time module here. So import date time, give a new object name, for example my date, and now we from the date time dot date we are passing in some day like 2013, 7 and 10, and what we'll do is that we'll print out this from the employee class that we have just here, and we are going to call the static method that we just created, that is workday. And what we are going to pass is we are just going to pass the my date object that we just created from this date time module, and we are going to print it and check whether this date is a weekend day or not. So it shows false here. That means that the values that we are passing, that is 16/7/2016, this is not a weekday. So what is happening is that whenever we are printing this with reference to the employee class, so it is calling the static method that is workday. It is passing the only argument, that is my date, that has been created here. And what it is doing inside this static method, it is passing it as the day, and it is comparing with whether it is equal to 5, that is Saturday, or whether it is equal to 6, and based on that it is returning a boolean value, that is false or true. So this was all about the basic difference between regular methods, class methods, and static methods, and the cases where you can use them individually. So for a quick review, regular methods are those methods that take as the self as the first argument, like the full name here, and then we have seen about the class methods that are given by the decorator at the rate class methods, which take in the first argument as the class, and then we saw about the static methods that don't need any argument to return a function. So I hope you are learning well of object oriented Python, and if you like my videos, please do hit the like, share and subscribe button.